This is the Jeff Orovitz Show.
All right, let's welcome back to the program Curtis Moore. He is the Senior Vice President of Marketing and Corporate Development at Energy Fuels. Curtis, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jeff. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. It's I followed this issue quite a bit. You've been on, 2 or 3 times now. I find your industry absolutely fascinating, and I think it's important because nuclear energy, I think, is key to our modern civilization. I mean, I was thinking about, you think back to the day, the 60s, the 70s, even into the 80s, and you think about the common bedroom or office or whatever, and it's like you might have had a lamp plugged in, maybe a radio. We didn't have all this stuff, right? And now there's this insatiable need for energy and electricity, and it's growing by the second with AI and all that. So, I mean, you guys play a key role in that. The nuclear energy industry plays a key role in that.
Absolutely. And now you say that, that modern civilization relies on nuclear energy. It relies on energy,
Yeah,
period.
True.
As you say. And, our civilization, our society is becoming more energy intensive, not less energy intensive. I mean, we can try to conserve energy all we want, but like you said, with AI, with data centers, with, all these, electric vehicles, whatever the case may be, we're needing more and more and more and more energy almost every day.
Yeah.
And so, nuclear is absolutely a key part of that because, like coal, like gas and other things like that is baseload. It's 24/7, 365, operates at high capacity factors. We need it all. We need wind, we need solar, we need geothermal, all that stuff. But you need the baseload. You need that steady 24/7, 365 energy.
What is, just re-educate us as to what is baseload? I mean, you said nuclear is an example, but what is that and what other sources are baseload?
Yeah, so baseload energy is stuff that is not dependent on like weather, like wind and solar. It is energy sources that operate 24/7, 365. So again, coal is baseload, natural gas is baseload, nuclear is baseload. In some respects, hydro would be baseload, though that is dependent on sufficient flow of water and that sort of thing. But really, that's it. And so you need that just baseline level of energy operating all the time. So, like I say, when you plug in to your wall, when you need the lights to turn on in your house, or if you own a manufacturing facility or something else that needs a lot of energy, the energy is there.
Yeah.
We depend on baseload electricity.
Do you have stats on how much, my example of the lamp and the typewriter versus now? I mean, how much more energy are we using nowadays? Does it look like a hockey stick going way up?
I don't know, to tell you the truth. I mean, everything I hear, I would imagine it does. But again, it's about to get even more. I don't want to say worse. It's about to become more important again with all these new demands on our energy grid.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get to what's been a controversial issue, Curtis, which is the mine that so Energy Fuels has a mine north, let's call it north of Williams, kind of in the Tucson area, called Pinyon Mine. And
Pinyon Plain.
Yep. Pinyon Plain. Okay. And you guys mine uranium there, obviously uranium ore. So let's start with the end, I guess, which is you have an agreement to transport the uranium ore through the Navajo Nation now, and you've worked with them for many months to do this. We'll get to kind of the controversy that was, and that I think you've worked through. But tell us about this mine that's in northern Arizona.
Yeah. So this is Pinyon Plain is what's known as a high grade uranium mine, and so when you talk about grade, you're talking about, kind of the richness of the deposit. And so Pinyon Plain is on the order of 1 to 1.5% uranium, which means that for every ton of ore, and ore is the rock that you're pulling out of the deposit that contains the metal that you're targeting. In our case, it's uranium. So for every ton of ore, if you have 1% ore, that means about 20 pounds of that is uranium metal. And so that's all we're doing is that we're taking the rock out of that deposit, loading it into trucks, and then taking it to our mill in southeast Utah. And so then at that mill, that's where we extract the uranium, we purify it, and produce what's called natural uranium concentrates, which is sort of the first step in the nuclear fuel cycle. Then we sell that material to mainly U.S. nuclear power plants who then turn that stuff into nuclear fuel. And an important part of those next steps is enrichment, and that's where our stuff becomes highly radioactive. That when it gets loaded into a nuclear power plant, the stuff that we're mining is actually, in the grand scheme of things, not that radioactive. It's natural uranium. It's uranium as it occurs in nature. And if you go out in your backyard, pick up a handful of dirt, there's probably some uranium molecules in it. It's pretty ubiquitous around the world, and particularly in the Four Corners region.
And you mentioned the Four Corners region. I think you talked about this last time you were on the program. Northern Arizona has some of the highest concentrations of uranium in the nation, in the world.
In the nation, for sure.
Okay.
The highest concentrations are in Canada, in northern Saskatchewan, in the Athabasca Basin. But outside of the Athabasca Basin, this region actually has some of the highest grade uranium deposits anywhere in the world.
Okay.
Around the world, most you would have a high grade quote unquote mine elsewhere around the world if it was maybe 0.2%, 0.3% uranium. So that would be like 6 or 8 pounds of uranium per ton. But these mines in northern Arizona are like 1 to 2% uranium. So again, that's like 20 to 40 pounds per ton, which again, in the grand scheme of things, is high grade if you take away the Athabasca Basin. And again, there's probably thousands of these deposits in northern Arizona.
Are you guys the only one mining? Is there other?
Yes.
So is there? Do you have plans for other mines here? If there's that much, or are there other companies going through the process? Or has it been such a fun process that you're like, eh?
Yeah, it is a tough place to mine.
Yeah.
Understandably, look, I mean, everybody loves the Grand Canyon. I love the Grand Canyon. I mean, shoot, I've rowed my boat down the Grand Canyon 3 times, so I get it. I understand what people want to protect. And if I thought there was even the remotest possibility that our mine would have any impact on the Grand Canyon or the springs or the seeps or anything down there, I couldn't work for this company. But yeah, I'd say it's probably more of a political and PR challenge than it is a technical challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Again, so this deposit is what's called a breccia pipe. Okay, and so they're called pipes because just imagine a pipe kind of standing on its end underground, and these things are anywhere from 50 to a few hundred feet in diameter, and anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 feet tall. And they predate the Grand Canyon by hundreds of millions of years. The Grand Canyon is only 5 or 10 million years old. And so, our CEO, I've heard him say, the biggest miner of uranium in northern Arizona is actually the Colorado River, just because it's just eroding these deposits just on an ongoing basis. And there's several of these breccia pipes actually exposed inside the Grand Canyon, the walls of the Grand Canyon, just naturally eroding uranium into the Colorado River every day. And again, I think that, not all of these breccia pipes are mineralized with economic quantities of uranium, but some are. We're aware of, probably a couple of dozen that are up there that could be mined at some point in the future. But, you need to get these permitted. That's a long process to get through, NEPA and an EIS and all that. So Pinyon Plain is going to be mined, right? Well, it's being mined right now. But beyond that, I don't see any uranium mines operating in northern Arizona, probably, at a minimum for at least 5 to 7 years.
Okay. They're probably like, look what Energy Fuels had to go through. How long did it take you guys from start to actually because your first transport was like in the past year, in the past 12 months or so. And that's when this controversy kind of erupted of, oh my God, they're bringing uranium through northern Arizona. What did it take though from concept to first truckload?
40 years.
What?
How's that
okay.
sound?
Are you serious?
Yeah,
I mean,
I am serious. So this deposit was originally discovered in the late 70s. Okay. And it's the history of this thing is quite interesting, actually, because it was originally discovered because of these breccia pipes. The nature of the deposit and how it was created, like I said, a couple 100 million years ago, is that it kind of created a hole in the forest. So if you go up there in northern Arizona, it's heavily forested, but there's just kind of this round hole up there in the forest. And so these deposits often have kind of a surface expression that's it's circular. And so they saw this round hole in the forest, and they thought, hey, let's drill and see if there's a breccia pipe here that's mineralized with uranium. And sometimes people will say, oh, are there no trees because it's radioactive? No, it's not. It's just because of the nature of the geology. It created different soil and groundwater conditions that the ponderosa pines and other trees don't like. We didn't cut down one tree to build that mine. but it was originally developed in the 80s and permitted. Our CEO actually built the mine and drove the shaft down to 50 feet or something like that before really uranium prices dropped. And that was really the what happened was that when the mine was being developed, of course, there was a lot of controversy. Even back then, there was activists, and I mean, honestly, it sort of shut down the radical activist group Earth First for a little while. Some people went to jail back then, and honestly,
because of sabotage and things like that.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
what they did is they actually chainsawed and cut down the power lines to the mine.
Wow.
And so if you drive up to the mine, you'll actually see a lot of the power lines. They just sort of stood them back up and put steel plates on either side. They're still there.
Wow.
And this is and even now, when we first started trucking, some activists went out there and caused some trouble, and he's, I believe, currently in jail.
Did they use? I just got to know about the saboteurs. Did they use handsaws and stuff like that? They crafted from their own foundry, because you always got to wonder, because I mean, we're all reliant. And my point being, we're all reliant on technology nowadays, unless you just live in some cave. And even then there's some technology involved.
Oh yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, I hear people say, oh, I don't like mining. Mining is bad. It's kind of like, well, if it's not mined, it's grown. So if you have anything in your house or that you use, a computer, a car, your house or whatever. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Do you like your iPad or your laptop?
Yeah.
I mean, how much stuff is in all these devices? So fair enough, it's probably not uranium based, but maybe the energy used to create the products is from uranium. Okay.
Yeah, it could have been.
So the long history, 40 years really. Is the CEO the same? Has the company? Has the company changed hands over the years?
Back then. He was not CEO back then.
Okay.
He was just
he was in the company. Wow.
Yeah. He was a young mining engineer. He graduated from University of Arizona, and so he's an Arizona native. Our CEO. Mark
Okay.
Chalmers.
Cool.
And,
cool.
Yeah. He kind of got the uranium bug in the late 70s, and
he's still but it goes to show you though how long the regulatory process, because it's not just your industry. I hear about things, maybe 40 years is quite extreme, but to get anything through, I mean, right on down to your local, just, person trying to build something. Oftentimes regulation just is a huge problem. Let me ask you this, Curtis, how do you see, and we'll get to the agreement you've got with Navajo Nation, because I think this is very important, but how do you see, because obviously since we've spoken last, President Trump has won the election. And I would have to say, and I think you would agree, but I don't put words in your mouth, a vastly different strategy and policies when it comes to regulations, when it comes to energy issues. What do you see changing with the Trump administration, especially in your industry?
Well, I mean, we see them taking some actions now that actually supports resource development and supports the activities that we need to do as a country to get off of like Russian uranium or rare earths from China, things like that, right? I feel like previous administrations sort of they said a lot of the right things, but when it came right down to it, the actions that they took were not supportive. And you mentioned the regulations, and again, we're not looking to reduce regulations or anything like that. We can live under this current regulatory environment. Although I would love to see NEPA sort of brought to heel a little bit, just because that's what can take a long time. And it's not, the Pinyon Plain took 40 years to get going, but it wasn't purely regulations. But if it takes you several years to get your mine going, and you're in a commodity market that has ups and downs, by the time your mine or project is permitted, well, the price may have dropped, and so you can't mine it from a financial basis. So that's probably the bigger issue. But we're hearing a lot of great things out of the current administration that will be supportive of mining in the right places. And again, our company, we're not just a uranium company. We also do rare earth elements, which is a pretty amazing opportunity. Vanadium, some other critical minerals.
What is that? What is that?
Vanadium?
Yeah.
Vanadium is primarily used in steel. It's a hardening agent for steel, like molybdenum. It's different grades of steel, but it also has some uses in, advanced alloys, aerospace alloys, vanadium, titanium alloys, things like that.
Okay. And rare earth elements, I think when we hear that, they're so rare. They're just, but what I've learned is that they're just really in small quantities and it's kind of scattered around. Is that fair enough? Or you tell me.
That's a good way to put it. They're not actually rare.
Okay.
Again, like if you pick up a handful of dirt in your backyard, it's probably got some rare earths in it too. They're not rare, but what's rare is to find economically viable deposits. Um, yeah, they are all over the world. There's lots of these rare earths all over the world, but it's hard to find deposits that are economically viable to mine and process into advanced rare earth products. And so our mill in Utah is actually the perfect place to process these rare earth minerals into advanced materials, which we've been developing those capabilities over the last couple of years. And so I think we've really kind of leapt to the front of the pack when it comes to rare earth processing in the United States.
Okay, well, Curtis Moore is with us. He's the Senior Vice President of Marketing and Corporate Development at Energy Fuels. And, the big issue that a lot of people have taken note of is the controversy in the shipping of uranium ore through northern Arizona. And this was mainly between your company, the governor. I think the governor got involved with this, and the Navajo Nation. And I got to say, I have a bias in this because I'm very pro nuclear energy. And I also think that there's a lot of NIMBY, not in my backyard stuff that happens in this country, in anything, if you try to do just about anything nowadays. I will also say that I recognize what, in particular, the Navajo Nation has gone through with the old uranium mines from the Cold War era, which we've spent time talking about in the past, and all the, I guess, the tailings and stuff that have been left behind. Irresponsibly, quite frankly, and the health issues that have happened, Curtis. You recognize that, and that's why you went to the table with Navajo Nation, I believe. Talk about that though. There's still hundreds and hundreds of, I guess, cleanup sites within the Navajo Nation from the past.
Yeah, if you go back to the 1940s, essentially, the uranium industry was essentially a government weapons program. We're in a Cold War with the Soviet Union at that time. We're in an arms race, and at that time, the U.S. government needed uranium for weapons, and so they basically put out a buying program that encouraged individuals and companies to go out and buy and find uranium that they could then sell to the government. And so a lot of that happened, it's just in the Four Corners region, not just on the Navajo Nation, but just throughout the Four Corners region. And back then, I don't want to be too hard on the guys that operated back then. Number one, they were trying to save the country from a national security standpoint. Number two, I don't think that they were intentionally going out and trying to ruin the environment or create health impacts. And I think there were a lot of things they just didn't know about. Mm-hmm. Because with uranium, even back then, I hear stories from people that when they were kids, their parents worked at a uranium mill. They'd go out and play in the tailings because they thought it was like a big sandbox, even though they were probably getting zapped with some pretty high levels of radiation. But we know a lot more right now. Kind of in the 70s is when things really started to shift. In a lot of respects, with environmental protection and health and safety and all that. That's when a lot of the big seminal environmental and health laws got passed at a federal level. And so uranium is no different from coal mining or other mining. Look, coal mining had black lung. Other mines, silicosis and other health impacts. Uranium had lung cancer and other respiratory illnesses. So again, that is really way in the past. It's not something that our industry struggles with right now. It's not like our miners and millers are having health impacts from it. We know how to manage it, but they didn't back then. But on the Navajo Nation, there are still on the order of 500 or 600 unreclaimed mines left over from that period. And so, they are understandably, I'd say have some generational trauma associated with uranium mining. Now, when we first started shipping, we didn't really know we had an issue with the Navajo Nation because, they participated in the permitting of the Pinyon Plain mine. And so when we started shipping, it was honestly a bit of a surprise to us that, Navajo Nation would have some objection to this, because we've actually trucked several thousand truckloads of uranium ore across the Navajo Nation over the last 15, 20 years, up until, last year even, or the year before. This wasn't an issue. But there are some pretty radical activist groups that have been out just trying to scare people and try to stir things up. Both tribal activist groups and non-tribal activist groups. And so when we first started shipping last summer, I think that sort of, came to a head. And again, like I said, the governor got involved, Navajo Nation got involved, and, Navajo Nation, said that, our trucks weren't allowed to cross, their land. Now, at the end of the day, we had every right to keep doing it. But due to that generational trauma, we felt that it might be a better strategy to sit down and listen to them.
So you voluntarily stopped?
Yeah. Yeah, we
because
could have just,
because the roads that run through there are state or federal roads.
exactly.
So they're under the jurisdiction of the state or the feds. Am I correct on that?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
You are.
Okay.
You are
Sorry.
correct.
Sorry. Go ahead.
And Navajo Nation has acknowledged that. And so, so at the end of the day, though, we decided let's sit down and talk to them, and let's see if there's some things that we can do to allay some of their reasonable concerns. And I'll tell you, from day one, it was very cordial, very productive. From day one, they told us we're not here to stop you. A recognition that they couldn't stop us, but let's see if we can work together on some of these issues, including the cleanup of some of these old uranium mines. And so over the course of the next 6 months, I was heavily involved in those discussions. They were it was really rewarding, actually, from a personal standpoint, but also just, we were able to come to some, really good agreements on ore transport that really makes it the safest in the world. I mean, uranium ore is, again, it's I don't want to minimize it. It's just rock with a little bit of uranium in it. You have to handle it properly, but it's also not highly radioactive. I mean, stuff that travels on our roads and highways every day is way more dangerous. I mean, gasoline, diesel, propane, things that can explode, things that can burn you, things that can, if you inhale it, it's bad for you. Uranium ore is none of those things, but let's see if we can do it better. We're always open to doing it better, and we came to an agreement, and we just started trucking again last week, and we're real proud of what we were able to accomplish with the Navajo Nation.
What's the agreement, Curtis?
What's the agreement?
Yeah. What were the concessions that were made to make them happy?
Yeah. So we agreed to let them inspect the trucks as they pass through the Navajo Nation to confirm that we are complying with federal law. We agreed
each one, or
yep.
So every truck has to go. So they're setting up like a checkpoint that you guys pull into. Okay.
Yep. We've been doing that.
Okay.
We're did some additional, let's say, covering over the back of the truck, over the load, to reduce even further the risk of dust or something blowing off. We've agreed to curfews and time limitations. So, for instance, we're only going to truck during the week. No weekends. And also only between be on the Navajo Nation between 8:30 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and just to avoid rush hour, avoid school buses, things like that. We've agreed to not transport during Navajo celebrations. There's various celebrations and holidays where there's a lot of people on the road, so we've agreed to not truck during those time periods. And again, we also agreed to help them with the cleanup of some of these historic mines. Now, we had nothing to do with those mines, but they're still out there. And, it's very frustrating to the Navajo Nation. And honestly, it's very frustrating to the industry that these things aren't being cleaned up, because it's almost like a black eye on us, even though we had nothing to do with it. The government just hasn't really been living up to their obligations. And so we were sort of in a unique position to be able to try to, get off a dead center and see if we can start having some real action to try to clean these things up. So, we can just kind of move beyond this history that still is sort of a dark cloud over us.
Well, I keep hearing from the politicians, though. I think some of them have been on this show, Curtis, that there's a plan to clean it up, or there's money put in to clean it up. Is that not hitting the ground? Is it? Yeah. Where is it?
There's lots of money to clean it up,
but no action.
There's no action. I mean, in some respects, I feel like they want to just study it to death. They spent millions upon millions, or I don't know how much. I mean, hundreds of millions, whatever it is.
Well, I'm convinced that from every town and city and every county to every state to the federal government, you heard about that, where they have the retirement of federal workers in a mine. Right. In an old isn't it in an old mine? I think that there's several mines around the country with studies, because the amount of studies that governments do, and then it goes and sits on the shelf is awe-inspiring. I got to tell you.
It is. At the end of the day, to clean these old mines up, you scan the ground. Look, the quote unquote good thing about uranium is that it tells you where it is.
Yeah.
It has a radioactive profile. You can pick it up with a Geiger counter or a scintillometer or some other measuring device. And if you see that there's excess quantities of uranium in the ground, scoop up the soil, you put it in a truck, and you haul it away. I mean, that's how you fix these things.
It makes the creepy, scary noise.
Yeah, yeah.
Quite frankly. Okay, so
Yeah.
you've got this fixed, Curtis.
Mhm.
You are transporting. How many trucks a day on average are going through northern Arizona, or what do you
Right.
project?
Yeah, right now it's two. So we're
Okay,
starting off kind of slow. It'll be three here in the next week, I think.
okay.
But over the but it's going to ramp up eventually. And again, because we're kind of squeezed on the time frame that we agreed to transport across Navajo Nation.
Hmm.
Now, again, without that agreement, we could ship 24/7, 365, just because that's federal law.
Sure.
And that's what governs this. Is that there's a lot of federal laws and regulations that govern the transport of radioactive materials. I think I read somewhere there's millions of truckloads of radioactive material on American roads every year.
I bet. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and this is the lowest level of radioactive materials. It's low specific activity. It's not nuclear fuel. It's not used fuel. It's not medical isotopes. Things like that are highly radioactive.
Okay. How long is the agreement
Um,
with them? Just indefinitely?
with the Navajo Nation,
Yeah.
yeah, indefinitely.
Okay. So you're
So
going to keep
because we're kind of squeezed down on our timing. It's probably going to be on the order of 12 to 15 trucks per day for a
okay.
little while.
Okay.
Eventually, but
Monday
again,
through
they're
Friday.
just full trucks.
Yeah.
It'll look like they're gravel trucks essentially.
Okay. So you're going to be doing that. And how long do you think this mine plays out, the Pinyon Mine?
Yeah, we'll see. It could be as short as 2 years. It could be as long as 5 or 6 years, probably.
Okay. And then at the end of the day, you've transported the uranium to the enrichment facility in
No, no, no.
mill. Give me right.
No, we do not do enrichment.
Okay. Okay. You take it to the mill
Yeah.
in Utah.
Yes.
Okay. And what is a mill? What does that mean? You crunch it all up and describe that. I don't know.
Yeah.
About that. Yeah.
So
I know how to
milling
do.
is-
I know how to do this radio show and a few other things. You wouldn't want me
Well-
in charge of uranium mine, Curtis.
Well, yeah. Probably don't want me in charge of it either. I know how to talk about it.
No, but what is the mill? What happens there?
Yeah. So the mill is where you extract the uranium metal out of the rock. So you don't just go pick up nuggets of uranium off the ground, right? It's bound up in minerals. And so at the mill, you take this rock and you grind it up into kind of a sand-like consistency.
Okay.
And then it goes into these large tanks. And it's all in an enclosed facility. Of course, lots of safeguards, lots of environmental protections, all that. And in these large tanks, put that sort of sand-like material that has the uranium in it. You hit it with sulfuric acid, and so the acid solubilizes the uranium, the vanadium, a whole bunch of other things. And then once you have extracted all of the uranium by using that acid, then everything is in solution at that point. It's in a liquid, and then you go through a number of other steps to actually purify the uranium. And then at the end of the process, you essentially dry it out again. Then you bake it, calcine it, and that turns it into what's called natural uranium concentrate, which is essentially, it kind of looks like a gray sand, and it's U3O8. And so, sometimes people refer to it as yellow cake, even though that's technically not an accurate term. But
Okay.
this U3O8 then goes for further processing and enrichment before then it would be loaded into a nuclear reactor, like for instance Palo Verde, which is west of Phoenix.
Okay. So then it leaves your facility in Utah. Not to create another problem for you, but that gets transported.
Yep.
Somehow you don't have teleportation that I'm aware of, like Star Trek or something, right? Nope. So does that get trucked as well, or train, or okay?
Yeah,
so that goes to a facility where?
Yeah. So we truck most of it to Illinois.
Okay.
So Illinois is the next step in the nuclear fuel process is called conversion. And that's where you take this sort of gray sand that we produce and you actually turn it into a gas, uranium hexafluoride. And that facility in Illinois, it's actually owned. It's a joint venture between Honeywell Corporation and General Atomics.
Okay.
The Honeywell conversion facility, and so they essentially turn our stuff into a gas, which is kind of like pre-enrichment. And so then this gas then will, and we also sometimes ship to. There's another conversion facility in Canada, kind of on the north shore of Lake Huron. So that's where we send our material to. Probably 90% goes to Illinois, 10% of it goes to Canada. But
that's not enriched. That's not enriched yet.
It's still not enriched.
Highly concentrated then.
Well, yeah, it's highly
liquefied.
concentrated. purified and gasified.
Gasified, sorry.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then it gets shipped again to the
then it
next
gets
place?
shipped again
Okay, what's that?
to an enrichment facility.
Okay.
And so enrichment is where you have essentially these cylinders that spin really, really fast. I don't know how fast it is exactly, but it's tens of thousands of revolutions per second, I think. Because at an enrichment facility, what you're trying to do is enrich the U-235 isotope, which if you enrich the 235 to certain levels, it can create a self-sustaining nuclear reaction. Okay, so when it comes out of the ground, uranium is 99.3 U-238 and 0.7% U-235. That's what's known as natural uranium. Okay, and that's all we deal with. We deal with natural uranium. It's uranium as it occurs in nature. It's not enriched. It's not super radioactive, anything like that. However, in enrichment, you're increasing that U-235 from 0.7% up to 3 to 20% U-235 to create these self-sustaining nuclear reactions, which puts out which creates heat, which will boil water, spin a turbine, and put electricity on the grid. Not too much unlike a gas plant or a coal plant.
Okay.
If you want to create a bomb, for instance, you enrich that stuff to 95% U-235, and so you create a very fast and explosive nuclear reaction, right? So, like a nuclear power plant cannot explode like a bomb. It's just physically impossible because the U-235 is not enriched high enough.
Is your uranium capable of, I'm not saying your uranium, I'm saying through the refinement process and the enrichment and everything, is it all equal at the end where they could, so same thing. So
yeah. If you wanted to make a bomb, you would start off with what we produce. But
you would have to mine that.
Yeah, but nobody's making bombs unless you're Iran or North Korea right now.
Yeah. Okay, so then it goes from that final step to a nuclear power plant. Is that fair? So in theory,
it gets enriched. Okay. Then it has to go to fuel fabrication. And that's where you make a fuel assembly. And and different nuclear power plants needs different specifications for their fuel assemblies. There are fuel fabrication facilities in the United States, like in the Southeast United States in particular. So it gets shipped again.
Okay.
and so there's an enrichment facility in New Mexico. There's enrichment in Europe, the UK, Germany, Netherlands, places like that.
So in theory, some of this stuff could go in that stage. It has to go to the final stage, which is the enrichment or the fabricate. You said fabrication. Yep. It could go on a ship overseas to Europe. And then from there, it's and I'm trying to keep this simple. I mean, I know you probably do a lot of interviews with industry insiders, but that's not me. So I'm picturing like whatever the cylinder is. What is it? Some kind of something that holds it, right? Is that what we're looking at? Okay.
Yeah.
So then that would get shipped to the power plant. Is that the final? Or is there another step here?
No, that's it. I mean, so we produce the sand. It goes to conversion. You turn it into a gas. Then it does go into a cylinder, because it's a gas. Then it goes to an enrichment facility in a cylinder, and there that gas is put into centrifuges where you spin this thing at a very, very high rate to try to separate the U-235 from the U-238. The U-238 is heavier, so it tends to migrate to the outside, and the 235 tends to stay in the middle in the centrifuges. And even after that, it's still a gas. Now it's enriched UF6. Then it has to be re-solidified. Now this is getting a little outside of my expertise because we don't have anything to do with this. But I believe it gets made into UO2 pellets, enriched uranium, which then gets put into fuel fabrication, fuel assemblies, and then that gets shipped to a nuclear power plant where it's put in a plant.
Okay. And the reason why I brought you through that, and thank you for describing that, and everybody out there, is because we have no idea that's all happening. Quite frankly, when we talk to you and you're taking the ore, you're the very beginning of this whole process. It doesn't just go to the facility and then it gets converted and created and enriched and sent to the nuclear power plant. I'm hearing 4, 5, 6, 7 different steps in different facilities around the country and potentially around the world, and then it gets shipped. So it could wind up, and just to use our backyard, Palo Verde nuclear power plant, which is that the largest in the West or the largest in the U.S.?
So it was the largest power plant in the United States,
Okay.
nuclear or otherwise. Not, I mean, it was the largest power plant, period.
Yeah. Yeah.
Until the nuclear power plant in Georgia, they just put two new units online
Okay.
last year.
Okay.
Now
okay,
that
but
is
it's
the biggest.
big.
Now Palo
But
Verde
it's
is second.
okay. It's a huge
Yeah,
nuclear power plant that
it is.
creates a ton of electricity. In theory, this could be mined in northern Arizona and go through
Yep.
all these steps. It could wind up in Europe and be
Yep.
sent back here, by ship and then by truck or train or something, and eventually on a truck, and then wind up in Palo Verde nuclear power plant. I mean, if we were to track that, it's a long process.
It is. But there is a lot of energy potential in uranium.
No, it's fascinating. I find it fascinating, Curtis, because it's such an involved, high tech procedure from start to finish. Yeah. And you guys have dealt with 40 years of this, and you're just the beginning. I don't want to use the word low level, but as far as the radioactivity, it certainly is.
Honestly, compared to enrichment and conversion and fuel fabrication,
oh man,
what we do is child's play.
Yeah. I find it fascinating. It's fascinating. And I'm glad you've come to a solution, Curtis, and that you're able to ship it. I think this is big for the economy. It's big for our country, for our energy needs. How many people you employ up there?
At the mine?
Yeah.
35 people at the mine,
Okay.
But that doesn't include other consultants and truckers and all that.
Yeah.
Although one point I wanted to make, going back to the previous one, is that, there is nuclear fuel and used fuel that probably travels through Flagstaff fairly regularly on Interstate 40. I mean,
I believe it. And
the Navajo Nation, by the way, and nobody seems to bat an eye, but our little, child's play stuff, natural uranium and rock, creates all this big controversy. Again, it's mostly activist driven.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine the stuff. Hey, I'm in my studio in Flagstaff right now. I'm about a mile from the train tracks, BNSF. I'm about a mile from I-40. I couldn't imagine, and this is actually a concern of ours, really, with the train tracks and not particularly your industry, but anything. You see all kinds of trains go by with chemicals and this and that, and what if there's a derailment? How long do we have till the winds blow? If there's some kind of gas, container on the train or whatever. Okay.
Yeah. Our little trucks are the least of your worries.
Yeah. I believe it now. And I thank you for explaining it, because we don't know this stuff, and it's such a detailed industry. Final thing here. What does this mine look like when you're done 5, 6, 7, 8 years, whatever? What does it look like? Because obviously you're drilling way down and you're going way down in the earth. And this is like a 14 acre site or a 20, how many acre site?
Yeah, 14
acre site. What does it look like when you're gone?
It'll look just like it did before we got there. There'll still be a hole in the forest, just like there was before we got there. We'll remove all the surface infrastructure. Now we are required by the state of Arizona to monitor the site for about 30 years to make sure there's no adverse groundwater impacts or anything like that. And so for probably 30 years, there's probably going to be like a pump and an evaporation pond out there. But other than that, it's just going to be, you can go camp on it if you want. I mean, it'll be fully reclaimed. You plug the shaft, you haul away any of the infrastructure that was left when you're done. This will be the 9th mine of its type that has been mined in northern Arizona since about 1980 or so. Okay. And I mean, I could show you, some of these formerly operating breccia pipe mines. All the rest of them were north of the Grand Canyon, so they're a little bit more out of sight, out of mind for folks in Flagstaff and Phoenix and whatnot. But yeah, you go out there, and if you didn't know what you were looking at, you would have no idea that a uranium mine operated there. It's just part of the landscape.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Do you have some pictures of those other ones?
I do.
Send them to me, and if it's okay with you, I'd love to share them in the podcast. I'll put it in the notes.
Yeah,
folks.
I know there's one in particular, a picture I took.
Yeah, okay. I'd love to share that with everyone. So I appreciate that. Okay, well, Curtis, congratulations on this agreement, and let us know any updates. I still got to get up there, and I'd love to do the tour, because I like doing these and adding these to my list of. Remember the time we went down a uranium mine? I mean, so I'd love to do that. We just got to get the schedule working on that. Appreciate it. We'll talk with you again real soon.
Sounds good. Thanks again, Jeff.
Thanks for watching this video. Thank you to everyone listening on the podcast as well. Do me a favor right now. Please subscribe. I appreciate everybody that's doing it. Subscribe, and share with your friends. If you've already done that, leave a comment. That helps us out a lot, and we'll see you back here real soon.